Hi guys, welcome to another video. Very quickly before I get into the topic of today's video, just want to mention the FOBT video I made a little while ago about how FOBTs are rigged or not rigged, depending on your opinion. Now this has had a huge response from people, a lot of people agreeing with me, but also a substantial amount of people who disagree with me, which is great. I'm going to make a follow-up video to that shortly. But that'll obviously involve getting the laptop out and looking at your comments and actually responding to them individually. So I know a lot of people liked the the Phil responds to comments video, whatever I called it before. So yeah, I'll make a separate video about as a follow-up to the FOBT video, and that'll be coming very soon. But to get on to the topic of today's video, I want to talk about payday loans. Now, you'll very, very, very rarely hear a story in the news about someone with a gambling problem without hearing about payday loans. Payday loans and gamblers or gambling problems go hand in hand. They go together like ant and deck, or salt and pepper, or I won't say coke and hookers again, they got a bit of a backlash last time, and beer and peanuts, I don't know, something like that. But yeah, every time you hear about gambling problems, it's very unusual, particularly here in the UK, that you don't hear about payday loans. Now, on the real off chance that you don't know what payday loans are, I'm sure you do, but they are supposedly short-term, high-interest loans. So you borrow, say, £400 for 2 or 3 weeks, and then you pay back like £500-600 at the end of it. Basically, the idea is, as the name would suggest, that they are to tide you over till payday. And realistically, the official party line from the payday loan companies is that they're there for basically for life's emergencies. So your boiler packs up, your car breaks down, all those unexpected expenses, they're there for that. But obviously, the payday loan companies don't really care what you're borrowing the money for, as long as they've got a good chance of getting it back with substantial amounts of interest. And that's what makes them so dangerous for problem gamblers. Now, what I'll do in this video is I'll explain my own personal experience with payday loans as a problem gambler. Before I do that, what I'll say is, if you do have payday loans, if you have taken out payday loans as a gambler, as a problem gambler, or as a gambling addict, they are quite easy to sort out. I said, and I keep saying repeatedly, I do promise it is coming, I'm making a series on dealing with gambling debts, or just dealing with problem debts in general. When you get to that stage where the repayments on your debts far outstrip what you're realistically able to pay. I'm making a series on that. It's going to be a little bit more in depth. It's going to be a bit more well produced and sensible than my normal videos. Normally it's just me ranting and raving in my car, but that is coming. But what I will say is that payday loan debts are actually one of the easier ones to deal with. So if you do have problems with payday loans, don't panic, they're sortable. So we'll start my experience by saying this. From my recollection, I have never, ever in my life used a payday loan, borrowed money from a payday loan company in order to go out and gamble. Never done it. Never thought, I'll borrow a couple of £100 and I'll go to the bookies. Never done that. Okay. So why am I talking about payday loans? Well, I have used payday loans a lot. A realistic guess would be I've used, 20 different payday loan companies in my time. Probably taken out 40 different loans. Probably total value, into 5 figures in terms of actually what I've borrowed from these companies. And what I've ended up paying back is almost certainly double, what I borrowed, because that's how these insidious money-grabbing fuckers actually work. I will take an element of personal responsibility, of course. I'm not here to purely say, oh, it was their fault, they made me borrow the money. Nobody made me borrow the money. Nobody made me sit there on Google desperately looking for a payday lender I hadn't used or hadn't mugged off and not paid back, in the heights of desperation. So I'm not saying it's the payday loan company's fault. It's my fault. It was my gambling addiction's fault. But personally, it's down to me that took out these payday loans. So if I'm not borrowing money to gamble, why am I borrowing money? Well, it goes back to what I said in one of my previous videos. Aside from gambling being a very solitary, secret addiction that's very easy to cover up to other people, you can have a gambling addiction, and because it's got no real outward symptoms, like if you had an alcohol addiction, obviously it would be very visibly obvious, only in terms of drunkenness, in terms of how the fact you'd smell of alcohol all the time, but also in the deterioration in your health, the effects it has on your skin, all these sorts of things. If you had an alcohol addiction, it would be very obvious. If you had a hard drug addiction, most of the time, depending on the drug and how often you were taking it, that would be very obvious. If you had an addiction to food, that would be fairly obvious as well. And if you had a sex addiction, I guess your partner would know about it before long, wouldn't they? Anyway, but a gambling addiction is very easy to keep secret from other people, because aside from the odd mood swings, generally there are no outward symptoms, and mood swings can easily be explained away by bad days at work and what have you. But payday loans don't only allow you, or in my experience allowed me, to keep my gambling addiction from other people. They allowed me to bury my own head in the sand and completely ignore my own problem for as long as possible. To give you an example, it would go, a typical scenario would go a little bit like this. I'd have a bit of money in my pocket. I may have just been paid, I haven't managed to do my brains yet. I've had a bit of cash in my pocket, and I'd go to the pub, or I'd go out with friends, or whatever, right? I'd go out somewhere where gambling was available, be it the pub, be it the bookies, maybe it would be online, but typically it would probably be pub or bookies, knowing me. And what I'd do is I'd have, say, a couple of £100 on me, and I'd lose it because I'm a gambler. And then I'd get another couple of £100 out, and over time, I might win some, lose some, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately the net result is always the same, isn't it? If you're a gambler and you keep gambling, you're going to lose. So you lose I lost me £400, say. Now, this would have been my money, but I would want to replace that money. I'd want to get that money back. And if I wasn't going to get it back gambling, I wanted to get it back some other way. And what easier, quicker way to replenish that missing money than to get a payday loan? It would be as ridiculous as this, right? I would have been in the bookies, I'd have lost my £200 cash, I'd have drawn out another £200 on my card, and I'd have lost that. So I was down £200, my bank account was down £200. What would I do? I'd go online and I'd get myself a payday loan for £400. And then I'd go to a cash point and I'd draw out £200 in cash. Because this way, I could be in exactly the same financial position as I was before I started gambling. I hadn't chased my loss on the machine. I'd chased my loss through this payday loan. I'd got my money back. And that's what I cared about, because getting your money back and restoring yourself to that same financial position you started in enabled me to ignore the fact that I was doing myself harm, that I was causing myself problems. I could keep my head buried firmly in the sand for as long as possible. Now you say, well, Phil, what was that money for? Was that for rent? Was that for your bills? Was that money that you needed, to fill your car up to get to work? No. Most of the time it wasn't even that. Most of the time it was my money. If you watched the video before about, my business and how I lost my business through gambling, a lot of it, I had access to cash. That wasn't an issue. It wasn't a case of I needed to borrow this £400 urgently. I didn't need to borrow it. But my brain told me that, I needed to redress the balance. I needed to get back to where I started from. And if I wasn't chasing the loss through the machine, I was chasing it through these payday loans. And it was just putting back the problem, allowing me to keep my eyes blinkered from my gambling problem for as long as possible. Eventually, of course, they pile up, and eventually, you can't pay them. What's amazing about payday loans is how few checks some of them must do. Because at points I must have had 12, 15 payday loans that had been defaulted on, I hadn't been paid. And there were still companies that would lend me money, would sub me money, which continued to help me cover up my addiction. I think I could count on one hand the amount of times I was ever asked what the money was for. And again, I'm not blaming the companies, because it was my fault, it was my decision. But these payday loan companies, they just enable not just the gambling, but in my situation, they enabled me to ignore the problem of my gambling, ignore the issues that I was causing for myself. And now, and only now, when I could no longer bury my head in the sand, when no one would lend me any money, and I accepted my problem and I made a conscious decision to deal with it, has the true extent of the damage come to light. And luckily I'm now getting my way out of it. You know, I'm battling against that debt and I'm paying it off in a way that's affordable to me, and that's what the videos that I'm making at the moment address. So if you're in a similar situation, subscribe to the channel, stick the notifications on, and you'll be one of the first to know when those videos go up. But yeah, payday loans and gambling, it's a lethal combination. Have a good day, guys. Speak to you soon. Catch you on the next one.